Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kobold Con. I am joined with the Hugo and Nebula award-winning writer, Kij Johnson, who is also
Hi,
the
all.
the designer for the new RiverBank RPG from Kobold Press. Kij, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm just very excited about this.
I'm also very excited. We there's been so much hype, and there will continue to be hype about RiverBank because it's so cool. It's such it. I think right now a nice cozy game, playing some animals, having still chaotic and kind of having some shenanigans, but like just cozying up by the riverbank as just like proper animals. Just it feels right. It feels like what I need in my life right now.
It's what I needed when
Understand?
I wrote it. It's exactly what I was thinking is that, it's like I just need something that is both smart and comforting,
Yeah.
that's cozy and clever. So I thought I would just give it a shot, and I absolutely loved working on it. So I've really had fun.
Yeah, I hope so because I think everybody else is going to be having fun with it as well. Um,
Good, good.
yeah. So just like last time, everyone, I'm going to start off with some questions. But if you have questions about the Riverbank RPG, please sock them up, and we're gonna get to chat's questions. But first off, I want to ask, how did like what are the origins of Riverbank? When did you start writing?
Mhm. Well, back before the sun had been invented, um, I remember playing actually minis,
Uh huh.
military minis, because D&D was just this sort of thing, chainmail still, and I. It was hard to find people to play with, but I went to my very first Gen Cons, and so before I was a writer, I was gaming.
Hmm.
And I didn't start writing until I was in my 20s. And I wrote fiction. And largely that's because I took a class on writing science fiction.
Hmm.
And so that's what I first imprinted on, I guess, like a baby duck. And so ever since then, I've been writing. And I have probably 60 or 70 short stories out. I've got 7 novels out, mostly fantasy and mostly featuring animals, in various stages of anthropomorphism.
Yeah.
Everything from nicely dressed, animals having adventures to actual, wolves and real animals.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got here was by writing all of these things. And a few years back, I wrote a sequel to Wind in the Willows, which is one of those classic children's books with Toad and the mole and the water rat and the badger, and Toad gets into all kinds of really ridiculous problems.
Hmm.
And I wrote a response to it because I was like, I really love this, but I just kind of wish there were some girls in it. And so I wrote a new version, and it was pretty popular, but mostly I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea of, this beautiful, fun world where, adventures are often farcical instruction. They're often ridiculous, and yet everybody takes them so seriously. It's
Hmm.
all chaos and bother.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part about that kind of like setting of like Wind in the Willows, Riverbank, or even something like the like 100 Acre Woods of like these animal
Winnie the
people,
Pooh,
right?
yeah.
Like very whimsical, but they all take themselves so seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, in the original, we have at the very end of the book, we have what we call the sacred texts anointed of old. And these are the books that were the core inspirations. And one of them was Winnie the Pooh.
Hmm.
But while I was putting it together, I use we a lot, and there's not really a reason because this is a sort of, I just did it myself. Um, but, but me and my editorial alter ego, I guess, maybe. But and as I was rereading all these works, I was like, they get into so much ridiculous trouble. They want things that are absurd and then they just go after it, wholeheartedly. And I was like, what does this remind me of? And it was like, what it reminds me of so often is adventuring groups where
Hmm.
you're like, of course we're going to go get the blank. And everybody's like, it's a really stupid idea, but we're doing it.
But
We're
we're
totally
gonna
going to
do
do
it.
it. So it just was a lot of fun to think, well, how could you write something that has this crazy structure without the sort of comfort of a quest at the heart of it, or the comfort of a dungeon crawl or something like that? How do you
Hmm.
do that? And so it was just a riot to try to think of the kinds of things people would get riled up about.
Yeah.
And I love doing it all. So
Yeah. So like let's talk a little bit about that. What are scenarios like in RiverBank? Because I know for a lot of Kobold Press's audience is probably more used to sword in hand, going into dungeons, stopping liches, stuff like that. But what is a game like this? What does RiverBank push the players into to kind of get them going?
Well, I mean, one thing to think is that for these characters, this stuff is as serious as a lich.
Hmm.
Your worst foe, the worst enemy you can possibly meet in this game is an appalling relative who's going to be like this loathsome great aunt or, hideously mean-spirited uncle or something like that, who is your bête noire and your ultimate arch enemy and the person who is most likely to disrupt your life. So a scenario, a session, actually, we will usually have the same structure, because we're not moving through a dungeon and we're not founding kingdoms. You'll find most of the time your characters are in the same landscape with some of the same characters, which means that instead of relying on we drop down a level and we get bigger monsters, instead you have to rely on the kinds of trouble you get into when you're surrounded by the same people. And so, a lot of things, for instance, every episode, every session starts with what's called the between times. And the between times involves sort of here's what happened since the last time you played to your characters. Because while you were out there having your job or, making breakfast or whatever you were doing, your
Hmm.
characters were having a life too. And they aren't any more or less silly when you're not there. So things kept happening while you were gone. And then in the between times, you find out the kinds of stuff that happened to your characters, that your characters got spun up into. And then we get into the scenarios proper, which are called situations. And a situation is usually really there is a goal,
Hmm.
but the goal may be very odd. It may be something like, here I am, I'm a very important novelist. That's me having a job. And so I need to impress somebody at a dinner party, and I only have a day to do it, which, in real life, that's actually not very fun as you race around trying to figure out your food. But if you're a bunch of talking animals and you're trying to figure out how to frost a cake and you only have paws, it becomes hilarious. So your situations will be things like events like that you are going to try to pull out of your ear at the last minute with insufficient preparation and a lot of things going wrong. You'll also might have something where you do have like a quest,
Hmm.
where you do want a thing and you were going to get that thing at any cost. You do have things like, I mean, anytime you live in a place, there are all kinds of things that just go wrong.
Right.
So you also can have a very cozy little adventure, if like in a snowstorm. And I, my day job right now is that I'm a college professor of writing,
Hmm.
and specifically, I think about narrative theory and story structure. So a lot of what I've been doing is sort of building systems where structure doesn't always point to we walk to a new place, we engage with things, and then we walk to the next place and engage with those things, or in the consequences of moving from place to place, and then what we do when we come back to the surface, for instance.
Hmm.
So they're all over the map, and some of them are very actually quite serious, and some of them are ridiculous, hunts for some pointless object, and some of them are events that everybody's involved in. There's like all these annual festivals, one of which I'll spoil one of them. It's called Old Greenies Day. And if you're an amphibian, Old Greenies Day is your big celebration. And all the amphibians in a neighborhood all get together and they walk all over the place and they beg for change. They sing amphibian carols to all of the houses in the neighborhood. But these things all too often turn into just sort of routes,
Yeah.
just crazy, chaotic, manic episodes. And so Old Greenies Day is a pretty good example of what can happen. By the end of it, they anoint everybody's an amphibian on Old Greenies Day, and they anoint a monarch of the amphibians who is never an amphibian, but
Oh,
is regrettably likely to be one of your characters, who is then painted green and carried around town in a chair unless you can rescue them. So that gives you an idea of the kinds of things that can happen in an episode. There's conflict, there's roles, there's a lot of things that happen that are neither conflicts nor roles. And then everything comes to sort of a conclusion because of the way the structure, the sessions are structured,
mhm.
such that at the very end, you receive your rewards. But your rewards can be tchotchkes that you put on your mantelpiece. So if you've been
Oh,
playing for a while, you could have like a little rack of, here's the medal I won for this, and here's, the statuette I made for that, and here's the thing I got for the other thing. And so you end up, it's utterly different in some ways. You don't
yeah.
you don't necessarily come up with a pile of gold pieces or a bunch of diamonds, although you might. But if you do, they are right up there with the little china figurine of a dog that you found on one of your adventures. So I really have enjoyed coming up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's been I haven't slept, I feel like, for 2 months, and that's because I just keep going, oh, here's another thing.
Yeah, I really really like that because I think there's something interesting about even the role play opportunities of sitting in a character who cares about something that is probably generally kind of menial and like doesn't matter that much, but having to come up with this like, why does this thing matter to me so much, and like how do I sit
Mhm.
and play this character who's like, this ribbon for like
I
the
must
thing,
have
I
it.
need to
Yes.
have it, like this means
Flower
something to me.
contests, flower contests are very important, and much chicanery happens around like the contests you might have at a fair and things like that. So there is a lot of, for your characters, their stakes are, they live in a sort of bucolic world. It's simpler than ours. I mean, I'm trained as a historian, so I'm aware that I am going through history and picking the cute pieces out. But we kind of talk about that a little bit in the book. But it's also, a place that these characters, the worst thing that could happen to them is being taken away from their friends at Christmas time. And in a world where that's not always the worst thing that could happen to us, it's actually kind of nice to be somebody where that's
Hmm.
your problem for a little while.
Yeah, that's really sweet. Um, so we know a little bit more about what are the kind of scenarios that we're getting into. What are the mechanics of Riverbank, or the ones that you can share at the very least,
Okay, yeah.
that help us move through those scenarios?
Sure. Some of this is actually because I knew I wanted this to be accessible to newer players.
Hmm.
I'm a nervous GM. It's hard and it's scary and there's a lot of stats and, I'm always sure I'm going to get it wrong. And, when I was young and if I got it wrong, there was always somebody who's like, well, actually. So at some point I just didn't GM that much. And I was like, and it's fun. I mean, being a GM is the most fun you can have a lot of times. So I was like, I'm going to do something that allows me to really lean in on the sort of the themes of the game,
Hmm.
which are chaos, which in this game we call pother, which is an English word that basically means sort of a light gray chaos. So pother,
Hmm.
which is like bother, but with a P. And I'm sure they're related. And so pother is like a consistent theme. Chaos is a consistent theme through this game. And I had to do a lot of thinking about how do you build a game around chaos? There are
Hmm.
games that do that, like Fiasco, for instance.
Right.
But Fiasco is also makes a virtue of a necessity because it breaks all the time. That's the point. That's why they called it Fiasco. If they had said exciting conclusion to a randomly structured game, most of us would have been disappointed. But because they just come flat out and say, okay, things are going to go wrong and you're all going to, terrible things will happen. You'll all be dead. Just
Just
ride
run
with
with it.
this. All
Yeah.
right, just run with this. So it was really, so I was thinking a lot about, how do you build chaos into a game where it's already somewhat chaotic because all the players bring their agendas and their characters and their ideas and their fun. And you know, how do you build something that satisfies, that doesn't just come unhinged? Because we've all been in that game where everybody went random chaos Muppet, and pretty soon you didn't know how to bring it back to the actual game. And so a lot of my sort of narrative theory, the way I've been teaching courses on this now for a long time, so a lot of that sort of becomes how do we how do we randomize? How do we complicate? And then how do we simplify? How do we bring things back together? And I read a lot of farces while I was working on this as well, like farce novels, because a farce novel is so much crazy. I mean, there's so much more crazy in a farce novel than there is in like a comedy movie or something like that. And so I was thinking a lot about this. So the mechanics are built to emphasize chaos. For instance, you like any other thing, you can succeed or fail at a deed. You can try something and if your roll is too low, you don't do it. And I and with that as sort of a basic mechanic, if in this game you have ways to redeem failures,
Hmm.
which cause trouble. So if you redeem your failures in one way, you'll get trouble of one sort. If you redeem them in another way, you get trouble of another sort. And if you just can't redeem it for some reason, if there's no way to succeed, then there's a table called the failure side table, which is sort of like nothing but critical failures. Like if you fail, it's a critical failure. There will be some other consequence, quite possibly, to what you're doing. So it seems it's actually the mechanics are actually really simple. That the if you want to do a deed and you tell me your game master what you want to do, how we reconcile that is actually quite straightforward. I think that a GM can learn this stuff in one session, and
Hmm.
after that, really only refer to a card. You don't even need a screen, people. You just need a card. But then there are all these things that go wrong, all these things that then have to be countered by your players. So it requires a little bit of a different kind of flexibility from the GM
Yeah.
and from the players. But it's actually not, I think that to some extent, this is the thing that a good GM always does anyway. It's always like, on the looking for the moment that these two things will connect or these
Right.
two things will divide and suddenly go in a chaotic sidestep. I mean, that's the delight of the GM is like, okay, so I didn't see that coming.
How do I piece these
And now I
together?
get to, improv my way through this one.
Yeah, I think that's some of my like most fun as a GM is okay, my characters have thrown all of this stuff at me. What am I doing? Oh, okay, you know what? Actually, this can connect to this. This could and I pull it all
Mhm.
together and then my players are like, "Whoa, how did you do that?" I'm like, "I had a
You're right.
plan the whole time. I
Yeah,
swear."
yeah, yeah. I totally had a plan. I wrote a farce some years ago. That the book that really triggered my sort of RiverBank quest. And what I found is that I was trying to write it in the same, things get worse, things get worse, things get worse way. And I really did not know how I was going to pull it together. And yes, just at the last minute, I was like, oh, I see how all these things come together. And
Hmm.
I was so proud of that. And I said, can that be reproduced? And it turned out, yes, the theory underlying how I did it was still true. So when I started thinking about a game, I absolutely was like, how can we leverage this? How can we actually codify this such
Mhm.
that the GM has enough guidance and the players have enough guidance that they can just go crazy, and yet still stay on topic insofar as there is a topic when you are a talking bat.
So I mean, I guess this is a good question of there, and I only know this because you and I have talked, but there's a difference between capital A animals and lowercase a animals. And so I think to
Yes.
immerse people in the setting a little bit, what is it like being a capital A animal?
So, yes. So this whole thing is taking place in something that looks quite a lot like sort of 1910s England, the Midlands, if you want to be picky. And in this time, as I've sort of structured it, there are humans and they wear clothes and they go to jobs and they, make tea and, complain about the government,
Mhm.
just as you or I would. And then there are animals with a capital A, and animals with a capital A are a lot like humans. They are both people. There are
Mhm.
animal people, there are human people, and in that case, you are, properly dressed. You have a cute house. You make tea. You can maybe complain about the government. You are more likely to complain about how the postmistress is not giving you your mail. But the trick is that you're not very big. Anybody who's ever read like Wind in the Willows knows that like Toad and Mole and stuff, they might be 2 feet tall. Winnie the Pooh is, he
Mhm.
might be a foot and a half to 2 feet tall. So you are just a small person, and this causes some of your problems because you're interacting every so often with humans, and to
Mhm.
humans you look like a toy. And so there's always a very real risk that some toddler is going to come, waddling up to you and try to squeeze you, which if you are a proper, decent, civilized animal would be the height of embarrassment.
Of
Oh,
course. Of
so,
course.
so awkward. So animals um, and I've sort of elaborately figured out how animals fit into this world.
Mhm.
World building ensues, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But then you have just plain ordinary animals. And the trouble is like a goose. So you can play a goose with a capital G. And if you play a goose, you are foot and a half, 2 feet tall, maybe, right up there. You're a large animal for the capital A animals.
Mhm.
But a regular goose is a real goose. So it's rude and it's surly. It doesn't see you as a family member. You don't see it as a family member any more than you or I would say, yes, monkeys are just like me.
Yeah.
That the animals in the riverbanks attitude towards animals, little a animals, is very much what a Victorian's attitude towards a monkey would be. It's like, well, they aren't really me. I mean, yes, there's some superficial resemblances, I suppose. Perhaps we are related somewhere back on the family tree, but I am no monkey. I am certainly no little bee bat.
Yeah.
I mean, I garden. What bat gardens? Only I, So it ends up being animals end up, you're playing an animal, capital A animal, but you
Mhm.
are living in this world where there are human non-player characters, there are ordinary animal non-player characters. There's a mayor named Diana that had decided long, long ago that animals somehow were like little pet, they needed looking after. And so she's always trying to grab animals and bring them back to her stable. But she's an ordinary horse. She's no smarter than another horse. She's just a little crazy, is all. So you have all of these others, and then of course there are animals elsewhere. You can go to London, and in London, animals have private clubs. We don't do too much with that in this game because we're only so many words. I could have, and that would have been another, 2 chapters. But you can absolutely join a private club in London where you get to share with all of the other rodents. You get to join the rodent club, or
Oh,
the stoats and weasels get to join a club, or things like that.
that's so good. It's such a delightful world.
I love this world. I really enjoyed it, and it was sort of a hybrid of some pretty deep research into history,
Hmm.
and then just delighting in all of these. We've all grown up with talking animals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the hardest thing in the world for us to imagine ourselves as a squirrel, holding a book because
Hmm.
we've been seeing it in our cartoons and we've been reading it, and we've been watching it. And, it's in comics, it's in fables from 2,000 years ago. So we're used to it.
Yeah.
And so being an animal, that frees us up to do things and think things and be things. And it also frees us up to, get away with certain things.
Yeah.
They're not always the smartest people, these animals.
sometimes, sometimes they make poor
They
decisions.
do sometimes make poor decisions.
I
They
was
have, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, no. Please, please, please.
Oh, I was going to say, one thing, this game does have stats for characters, but they're not the usual stats. You have four stats in this game. One is charm, which is not
Hmm.
charisma. One is intrepidity, which is not strength or anything.
Uh
One
huh.
is pother, which is sort of how much of a chaos magnet you are. Because we all know that person who,
Just
even if they
follows
didn't
them
do a
around.
single chaotic thing in their life, it's like if anybody's going to step on a nail, it's going to be them. And then there's sense. And so, charm, intrepidity, pother, and sense, those are the sort of parameters. Those are the ways you are in the world. And
Hmm.
yet, even that, you don't ever use those things in a really focused way to say, okay, I'm going to use my charm to achieve this thing.
Hmm.
It's much more, it's much stranger than that. I guess I can say that. But
it's.
yes. But yes, so you're not, I mean, you don't have dexterity exactly. You
Mhm.
don't have, any of the usual things because you're not in the usual sorts of trouble. You know,
Yeah.
you're not you're not ever going to be in some of these situations. Although I'm sure somebody's going to kit bash this thing and try to do, it's like, but there already are some good systems where, talking animals go out and kill things.
Yeah.
So this is just maybe not that game.
Yeah. I, I was imagining earlier on when you were like kind of talking about like, oh, how do capital A animals think about like lowercase a animals? And I was imagining there was something that you wrote in like one of the videos that you had about like going on a picnic and like hoping that the sheep don't ruin it. And I was imagining like a proper sheep at the picnic going, ah, no, not come
What?
on,
Yeah.
you're giving us a bad name. No, I'm not
Yeah.
like them.
Yeah, no, well, and that is like the problem. It's like, here you are, these civilized animals, you're going to go have a nice picnic, you find a pretty tree, you lay out your cloths, you put out your buns and your tea, your little vacuum flask of whatever you're drinking.
Hmm.
You're still only 2 feet tall. Sheep are the size of moose.
Yeah.
So when that first curious sheep comes snuffling up to you, you are staring at a very small elephant that is interested in your tea buns.
Hmm.
And it has a whole bunch of little friends who are not little, who are also now curious about you. So, I mean, your experience of the world is just very different.
Yeah.
It's like if you walk into a human space, your head comes up to the seat of the chair. If you are trying to make a cake for a human for some reason,
Hmm.
the cakes you're going to make are going to be like this big. So they're like bigger than cupcakes, maybe, but are you really, so are you going to somehow try to build a cake that is the size of a table to you? So it ends up, there's a lot of different things that go into this, and that's some of it is just like the size discrepancy, the fact you're engaged with these different kinds of non-player characters,
Hmm.
and that each of them you relate to in different ways. Each of them brings a different set of challenges and also a different set of opportunities for mayhem.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so very good. Everyone in the chat, right about now we're going to start taking some questions from all of you. So if you have any questions about the RiverBank
Ask
RPG,
away.
please ask away. um one question that we have here is, so will there be actual roles for the stats? And ROLLS, not ROLES. as so like I guess when you're using
Complicated.
yeah,
Yeah.
complicated. Yeah.
So the way it works is that different animal sorts, because the kind of animal you are is called a sort. Different animal sorts have different basic stats. And then those stats are modified, and you have some control over the modifications as you add things to who you are. And then you have voluntary points. So there's not a point where you're just like, okay, so am I a smart one or am I not? It's more like, okay, so if I decide I want to play a mole, moles will have this sort of basic thing, but then I just tweak it all over the place because I have these different opportunities for tweaking it. But
Hmm.
since stats don't really work the same way in this game, um, having high sense is not going to make you the best person to perform this particular deed at this moment.
Hmm.
So, and this is something I think about in the book I talk about is that, in a conventional game, if you have high strength, then anytime there's a strength problem, they point you at it. And every time you're by yourself and you have a problem to solve, you go to the hammer you have. So you
Hmm.
use strength because that's what you're good at. This is a game where which to my mind actually reflects life pretty well. I use somewhere in there, I say, sometimes you end up pounding a nail with a shoe, and sometimes you end up trying to kill a fly with a hammer. You don't always get to use the stat that you would think would make the most sense to you. And so
Hmm.
you end up having to find sort of other solutions than
Yeah.
just having, relying on the fact you're high dex. And so therefore, obviously, you're the person who should be doing this task.
Yeah, I really like that kind of play on like the traditional way that we think of like quote unquote skills and like the way that players engage with that because it very much
Hmm.
feels more like the stats are more reflective of like not what you can do but somewhat of like who you are in any given moment
Exactly.
and like
It's like,
how the
how do
kind of
you,
person you
yes,
are.
that is exactly it. Who are you? What is your approach to life?
Hmm.
Is it to ask for help or to be, to get other people to help you? Or is it to get out there and just do the thing? Or is it, just sort of things work out, you just like one way or another? Or is it to think your way through?
Hmm.
That general attitude towards life, then that's your basic stat.
Right.
But then those stats, as you modify it, because of course my lady mole would not be your lady mole.
Hmm.
And so you start to adapt. But yes, absolutely. There are stats, but they're not rolled the same way. They are constructed more like.
Yeah, I think that goes kind of to this next question that we have. Um, which I think maybe not so much this first part, which says, can we talk about like what classes look like within these animals? But the other part was like, is there anything fun with like clothing in the game and like all of like outfits and like other things that your characters will have on
Oh my
them
goodness,
that
yes. The
changes
point of
how?
this, I
Yeah.
mean, there actually one of the things I wanted to do is make this a game you could play without a scenario.
Hmm.
Can you what we call ad hoc games? So an ad hoc session is a session where the GM did not necessarily prepare anything, and yet you and your buddies want to play, and so you just sit down and you just sort of vamp it. My assumption is that people are going to be drawing the hell out of their characters. We're going to see so many little outfits and so many painstaking descriptions of what's in the parlor
Hmm.
and stuff. The nature of cozy cottagecore is the charm of the detail.
Hmm.
Cottagecore is we like the worlds, but people who relate to cottagecore usually it's like they have very particular notions. This is what a cottagecore dress looks like. This is what a gent would wear. This is
Yeah.
what we would do for dinner. And those tiny things are definitely important. Now, most of that's not codified because honestly, I think people are going to, this is a game that's just going to invite that.
Hmm.
You do generate a lot of things at the beginning, like getting a pet. You can have a pet. Pets are insects because, of course, it'd be kind of weird if you were a rabbit with a pet rabbit. So, and also rabbits would be really big. So they've instead bred all of these exotic insects, and the exotic insects then become your pets and other invertebrates.
Hmm.
But to the classes question, um, this is your sort is as close as you got to that kind of thing. You don't play, this is not like bunnies and burrows where you're a seer rabbit or
Hmm.
you're a, the I forget what the bigwig clone was, but
Yeah.
a fighter rabbit or whatever. Because in real life, most of the time we just sort of muddle through with the tools we have. And sometimes we have the right tools for the job, and sometimes we don't. But we still have to do it. So we don't have warrior, stoats. Honestly, I think there's some pretty good games out there where that already exists. I
Uh,
mean, playing mouse guard solves
yeah.
everything for many of us.
Mouse Guide, Root, Wander
Iron
Home, 50
Claw, yeah. I mean,
Chess.
they've been around for a million years, and this was meant to be something where the problems being solved are different, and the tools that you're using are different.
Yeah. Got a question over here
Mhm.
that says, will the book include resources for GMs to create stories and adventures, and what will that look like?
Yes, there's a chapter. Oh, and that's my cat's tail. So thank you, cat. Here we go. There we go.
Oh.
Has to move. She's so yes, I knew she was going to show up sooner or later. You have now seen the tail of my cat, which sounds like a line from a French grammar book. No, the fifth chapter of the book is basically for the GM because this is designed to be accessible to beginning GMs, especially. I'm trying to make something that a timid GM could try.
Mhm.
So chapter 5, by that time, we've already talked about how does a session work and stuff like that. But it's absolutely gives a bunch of tools, including some tables you could roll on for how to build stories that are not simple quest stories.
Mhm.
Some of this is based on a really great book that about story structure by he's gone now. His name was Jerome Stern. It was a book called Making Shapely Fiction. And he gave a whole bunch of like other kinds of stories that can be told. And
Mhm.
it's like, don't always write a quest. There's a million things you can do that are not quests. And he describes these shapes, as he calls it. So there are tools, specific tools that are designed to help the GM, including some tables for ways to complicate a situation, but scenarios already have complicators and simplifiers built into them. So
Mhm.
a situation does not look the way that a scenario might in something else, where you have a bunch of here's a place and some people you'll find and some things you'll find,
Mhm.
because these are the same houses that you walk by. Some of them will absolutely, it's like you've never been inside Toad Hall, so here is Toad Hall's interior, but Toad Hall is part of the landscape.
Yeah.
So you walk by Toad Hall all the time. It's just that now you get to see what Toad Hall looks like on the inside. So yes, there's a bunch of tools for that. And what I'm hoping, I had a lot of ideas, I just didn't have time or space to put in. But I'm hoping that this is sort of the start of thinking structurally about scenario design,
Yeah.
in a maybe a different way, or maybe just a different angle on the way we do it.
Yeah. Um, I love that. I'm very excited for to dig into that. I have another question here that says, how specifically rooted is the system to the time frame that it takes place in? Do you think that this is a game that you could apply it to a different setting of like similar kind of
Mhm.
type? Uh, yeah.
A lot of the writing about it in the book, like there's a chapter of setting, which is all the places in the riverbank and the nearby human village, and some discussion of some other places, and then all of the non-player characters. There's probably 50 or 60 non-player characters described in another chapter. So all of those things are still, those are very specific. And things like motor cars is a good example. In this time frame,
Hmm.
motor cars are starting to be a thing. In the city, there are a fair number of them. Out here in the middle of nowhere, turns out, in a piece of nerd history, if you want this, the first tractor in England was actually, and here's the cattail coming again. The first tractor in England was 1908. The company that made it, they sold one total. So there were no tractors in England until World War One. There was that one, which probably, somebody bought and then was deeply embarrassed and hid it in their barn or something. But so it's full of like those kinds of details, but actually the mechanics, the system, the way the sorts work, all of it was designed to be flexible. So I absolutely, when I was originally talking to Wolf
Mhm.
here at Kobold about this, I was like, I think this is super adaptable. I could see this being the 1930s. If you get into modern times, it gets harder and harder to sort of justify how, entire communities of small animals live amongst us and we never noticed somehow.
Mhm.
But absolutely a Victorian version. I could see if you are a history nerd, I say this to whoever you are who asked this question, whatever period you want, it would be actually not that hard for you to, nerd out, read some books or look at some stuff online and say, okay, so here is my Georgian England version. Because in my mind, it exists. It just
Right.
hasn't been written down yet.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I mean, yeah, that would make sense. They didn't just pop up out of nowhere.
Hmm.
I love that so much. Um, let's see. What's another question here? Um, is do you think that this is a good game to teach children how to play RPGs?
I think so. For one thing, you would keep it simple. I mean, you would pick the simplest of scenarios, or you might just even do an ad hoc thing. Some of it has to do with the age of the children, but
Mm-hmm.
like a little kid, you could do an ad hoc session where your animals have somebody's appalling relative is coming and we quickly must clean our room. But how do you do that? It's like, what are we going to do? We were in the middle of a craft project, say your two adorable animals. And so your two adorable animals are trying to figure out, do we hide things in the closet? Do we hide them under the bed? There's not even a plot to that, but you would have all of these opportunities to create mayhem and all of these opportunities for things to go wrong and for the ticking clock of, oh, she's going to be here at 3. We got to get this done. Tick, 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 tick goes the timer. And that would be for a really little kid. For older kids, absolutely. I mean, it depends on, sort of how much they like cute. At a certain age, little kids love Wind in the Willows, and then some kids just never stop loving it. So there are 14-year-olds out there who love Wind in the Willows. But it's as a way to sort of introduce people to the idea, here's a die, here's what happens when you roll it. Here's, it's not hard. The mechanics themselves are really quite simple. And there's a lot of sort of building numbers that happens in it. And so it would be, I think, pretty doable for a little kid, and also full of cute stuff. And since one of our sacred texts, Anointed of Old, is the Arnold Lobel stories, the Frog and Toad stories,
Mm-hmm.
those things, there's very little plot. And yet those are very, very satisfying for children and for adults, as you and I just said.
Yeah, I've
We
got
were just
my
talking about
copy
that.
right over
Yep,
there.
mine's right there. Yep.
um, awesome. I think we have time for just about one more question.
All right. I'll be quick.
Let's see. There was a question here that I saw that I really liked. I just have to find it again.
If you could be a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
A willow.
Yeah, right?
I
I think so too.
right. I think it's really nice. I like the flowiness of it.
Hmm.
How about you?
Honestly, I think I would be an alder, a big,
Ooh,
beautiful, or maybe a chestnut.
ooh, both good. Both. Ooh.
Hmm.
Okay, I found it.
Yes.
Can we talk about how the cards fall into the game during downtime? How do the cards
You
help?
mean the between times?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay, yes.
between times.
So,
Yes,
and I'm going to sort of spoil out how between times work because we might as well.
might as well.
Between times, essentially, the GM determines how much time has passed. This may have been decided before the last game ended, and the GM may have said to everybody, okay, next time we get together on Tuesday, it will be 10 days. Some of that, they might make those decisions based on what's called the RiverBank year, which is the calendar of the RiverBank. There's a big festival coming, so we're going to start the next one 2 days after that festival or the day of that festival.
Mhm.
So the GM has some tables that they roll on, which will tell them what's been going on during that period to the environment. Like, was it weird weather? Did a hayrick fall down?
Mhm.
Was there a sudden, did a bunch of seasonal insects suddenly turn up and be a nuisance? Things like that. And then there's something they roll on a table, which is the denizens table. And the denizens table tells you what's been going on for your neighbors. So there was a fight between Madame Sansonnet and Madame Amalthea, about who gets to use the name Madame. They're both NPCs in this story. So essentially you get the gossip. And then each player is invited to say what they thought their character was doing, because you set for yourself goals. And so you're like, well, I decided I needed to fix my roof. And so that's what I was working on.
Mhm.
And then you draw a between times card. And the between times card tells you the thing you didn't know that happened during the between times. So yes, you thought you were going to fix your roof, but you draw the between times card that says, well, actually you sprained a paw at some point. And now you figure out, did you sprain the paw because of fixing the roof? Did you sprain the paw after fixing the roof? Did you sprain the paw and that's why you never got around to fixing the roof? So you basically adjust. Essentially, you say, here's my plan. And then you say, and here's why I didn't get to do it exactly the way I thought. So the between times becomes this random generator. It also is a random generator of stories for ad hoc sessions. So
Yeah.
it ends up being super useful if you're playing without scenarios, and especially if you're playing without a GM, because there's a way to play this game without a GM.
Oh, I didn't even know that there was a GM list for it.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
Yes, there is. I'm so proud of it.
I can't wait for that. It
Chapter
feels
5.
see, there it is. It's so good. Well, thank you so much, Kij, for having spending tea time with
Thank
me
you. Thank you.
and sitting along the riverbank. I can't wait to have this book in my hands. I
Oh,
just
and
need
I'm
to.
beyond excited too. This has been the adventure of my entire writing career to be doing this. So it's just been a hoot, and I'm so happy you guys are doing it. So yes, thank you everybody for coming, and go look at some of this stuff, and I hope I'll see you on the riverbank.
Yes. Don't forget, everybody, you can go to sign up to get notified for the RiverBank Backer Kit, which goes live the day after Kobold Con.
Yes,
This
Monday, Monday, Monday,
Monday
Monday.
is coming so close. And hey, you'll be able to get it. I believe we'll also have the preview PDF up on
Hmm.
there as well. So if you're like, hey, I want to make sure I'm actually going to like this before I go in, you'll be able to get the preview PDF. And hopefully that'll be, if this wasn't
Yeah.
enough to sell you, the preview PDF definitely will be. So go check that out. We are going to take another quick break. We will be back at the top of the hour talking with Celeste and Wolfgang about the Labyrinth World book and the Labyrinth Adventure book. So we will see you all then. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
In this new cozy RPG from Kobold Press, you navigate the intricacies and often the bedlam of polite animal society. Designed by award-winning writer Kij Johnson and featuring art by Kathleen Jennings, each page brims with charm and whimsy. At the table, your decisions matter. So, while animal life might seem as effortless as a stroll in the garden, your social calendar demands much more than a stiff upper lip. RiverBank introduces a new role-playing system, and players must balance their characters' animalistic and poetic sides. Veer too far to either side, and total disaster may follow. So grab your friends and put on your finest plumage. Then come dance a waltz of whimsy with a hint of hilarity and a dollop of drama. The cozy RiverBank RPG awaits. Download the free preview PDF and pledge today on BackerKit.